We all have them in our lives. They are those people we love to hate, because secretly we wish we were them, or at least had things as easy as they do. They are our frenemies, our friend enemies. Those friends, family members, colleagues, or just acquaintances whom we secretly compete against, and who always seem to have the upper hand, a better sense of fashion, always seem to have a fuller head of hair, a better physique, more expensive vacation plans, and whose children or grandchildren are always more successful than ours. Now, I realize that by referencing the mere existence of such people, I've probably lost you for the entirety of the sermon, as you are now wrapped in your feelings of frustration and envy as you imagined that friend you secretly love to hate. That person for whom the Germans created that lovely word, Schadenfreude, the pleasure derived by having someone else experience misfortune. These frenemies occur at all ages of our lives. I remember my first one. His name was Jimmy Merrick, and we met in the 3rd grade. Things were great at school. I was the fastest runner until Jimmy Merrick showed up. I would always win those impromptu sprint races we would organize at recess. I'd gotten used to everyone chanting, "Luke, Luke, Luke." And during the race, that's what I was expecting to hear until I heard the chant change to "Jimmy, Jimmy, Jimmy." No matter how hard I tried, Jimmy always ended up beating me by at least a half step. I couldn't understand it. I was supposed to be the fastest kid at school. And Jimmy didn't just beat me, he made it look easy, like he wasn't even trying. Although Jimmy and I were friends, something inside me shifted, and I began to hope that he would trip. He never did, and soon I stopped racing altogether. I'm sure Joe has a feeling like that occasionally. I made excuses about being hurt or not liking to run anymore. It's boring, I'd say to my friends. The monkey bars, that's what's cool these days. But if any of those 3rd graders had been self-aware, they would have not believed my excuses for a second, as the envy in my eyes and the frustrated disappointment was on full display in my body. Have you ever felt that way? You know, when one of your friends or siblings outshines you, and you can't do anything to regain your sense of satisfaction, a feeling like things are good, and you are too. I mean, you are perfectly happy with your single scoop of ice cream until your friend sidles up with their 2 scoops of ice cream. And then it's not enough. The flavor of the ice cream tastes different now, not as good. I'm certain that you've all had experiences like that. That there are individuals in your lives who put you in that place. Now, I want you to think about the flip side of the equation. Have you ever noticed when you're the frenemy? When you've brushed off your excellence or achievement and made something look easy, nonchalant, like you didn't even break a sweat? Yes, we rarely consider that notion. We don't typically think about the way that others view us as being better than them or having things easier. No, for us, it's always a struggle. And we can't fathom that others might envy us or that it might look easy when we're doing what we're doing. I'm quite certain that Joseph had never considered it. No, in that story from the Hebrew Bible, he just waltzes out to find his brothers who are tending to the sheep. And they see him coming from a long way off. And they can tell it's him because of that infuriating, self-entitled ease in his gait as he saunters up to find them, and by that blasted cloak, long-sleeved of many colors, that bedazzles in the sun. the coat given to him by their father to prove that he was the favorite. His approach is so protracted that their contempt bubbles up and becomes a full-blown conversation with a plot as well. Here comes that dreamer. Come on, let us kill him and throw him into one of those pits. Then we'll say a wild animal has devoured him. And then we'll see what's become of his dreams. Now, I doubt that your Schadenfreude has ever taken you to those extremes of wishing someone else's death. Tripping's one thing, let alone plotting to kill somebody. No, you've probably been more like Peter in today's gospel, for instance. When he sees Jesus showing off again, striding across the turbulent sea as if he was just going for a stroll, he must have thought to himself, boy, he makes that look so easy. Well, if he can do it, maybe I can too. If he'll just give me permission, then I can set myself apart. I might not be as good as Jesus, but I can at least be better than all the other disciples. So Peter's ego sets up that classic scenario as he breaks all the laws of physics and ventures out on the water. And what looked so easy when Jesus did it now seems impossibly hard all of a sudden. Peter panics and begins to sink. He cries out for help. "Lord, save me!" Of course, Jesus does, and smugly comments, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" "I don't know, Jesus, did you see me sinking? I mean, hello." And I would guess that you've likely heard all kinds of sermons on this text that present Jesus as the answer to the problem, whatever the problem. As if he can answer every situation that causes you strife or grief or causes you to panic. Just look to Jesus, the preacher might say. You've likely heard him suggest that life is filled with many problems that cause us to panic and lose faith. But if we can just look to Jesus, we can avoid sinking. I don't know about you, but that doesn't jive with my personal experience. If we could only have a little bit more faith, they tell us, Jesus will come to our rescue. The episode on the water becomes then all about us and the benefits that come from being in relationship with Jesus, having an ecclesiastical insurance policy that says when the stuff hits the fan, Jesus is there. Not State Farm or Allstate, Jesus. Well, this preacher doesn't agree with that line of thought. I don't think that's what this text is all about. Not at all. But I do think the text is inviting us to reconsider where we look and where we gaze. It's not simply just a call out to God for help or simply gazing to Jesus. Those are important starting points, as they perhaps help us realize that we are not as self-sufficient as we imagine, and certainly not as we project into the world. They do destabilize our egos and allow us to perhaps see ourselves and those around us for the first time, to imagine a new world of possibility. Instead of focusing on Peter and his feelings, the gospel highlights Jesus' choice to walk on the waves as a deliberate recollection of what God did at creation. The very words that Matthew uses in this scene are meant to evoke the destabilizing conversation between humanity and God that is enshrined in the wisdom tradition of Job. Do you remember Job? That great story, great myth from the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible? Well, Matthew states that Jesus went to them walking upon the sea. And each of the terms also appears when God questions Job about the cosmos. According to the Greek translation of that text, God uses the exact same Greek words and phrases as Job did when he says, "We went upon the springs of the sea and walked in the recesses of the deep." Only God walks on water, according to Job. So Jesus walking on water is all about the possibility of creation and the world that God has created us to live in. Like the book of Job, perhaps the aim of this story is to decenter us, to make the story not about us at all. The text is filled with supernatural phenomena to prompt us to look at the world we live in and to see it differently. We choose to live in a world of scarcity and competition for scarce resources. We fight wars over natural resources, and we plot to kill our siblings because we fear that our parents love them more than us. The text offers us a mirror and shows us the world we choose to live in, where we quietly strive to get the most of that most important resource, status. The faith that we lack is not faith in God. The faith that we lack is faith in ourselves. You see, we don't really believe in ourselves at all. We don't really believe God when in God's statement about us, that God made us good, very good. No, we think we can only claim that status if we knock and tear others down. If we can point out others' insufficiencies, then maybe we can feel a little better about ourselves. We imagine sometimes that only happens when we say hurtful things to each other, when we gossip or deliberately create barriers that others cannot cross. But I think that those are just the sins of commission, and there are also sins of omission. When we curate our lives so as to deliberately present ourselves in a better light. When we lie about who we are. When we refuse to be vulnerable. We close down creation and deny each other's inherent goodness. When we strive to achieve while pretending not to, when intentionally making things look easy when they're oh so difficult, we not only harm ourselves, we wound our neighbors and damage the fabric of creation itself. This text is inviting us to wake up to new possibilities, to turn and to pivot in a new direction. It reminds me of a scene from Christopher Nolan's 2000 film Memento, starring the Australian actor Guy Pearce. In the movie, Pearce's character has had a traumatic incident and is unable to make new memories. Despite struggling with short-term memory loss, he's attempting to track down his wife's murderer. Each day he wakes up and can't remember essential details from the day before. And so he's got tattooed all over his body clues about the case that he's investigating. Even when he's awake, he sometimes can't remember what just happened. And there's one moment of the film that I've always just loved, where he comes to and can't remember what he's doing. He finds himself running in a parking lot, and he sees a man across the row of cars also running. And he thinks to himself, okay, what am I doing? He concludes, oh, I'm chasing this guy. And so he makes to bridge the gap between the cars, only to realize to himself, oh no, he's chasing me, as he dodges a bullet and takes off in a different direction. It's that kind of pivot the text calls from us today, to wake up to the world we've chosen to live in, a world that shuts things down, and instead to live in a world that opens things up. Today, we're invited to stop living in that fearful world where we're constantly competing, chasing resources, and seeking status. We are encouraged to see God's abundant world and to claim the status that God has given to all of us, all of God's children. You are good. Yes, you are very good. So stop trying to make things look easy and just be honest about your struggles. This week, a good friend helped me see just how important this is. We had a conversation where I was unburdening myself and sharing some difficulties from the week and just sitting in anguish, trying to understand what it might mean, how it could have been different, acknowledging where I'd failed. She listened as I talked until I eventually trailed off. And then she smiled and laughed and said, "This is wonderful. It's so wonderfully helpful," she said. "I mean, it's so helpful to know that you're not perfect." I laughed. I said, "You just need to talk to my wife. She'll tell you." "Of course I'm not. You see how many messes I make every day. I literally apologize to you almost every day for some careless thing that I say or do." This conversation helped me to see the limited world that we are choosing to live in instead of the one God has created for us. Like Adam and Eve, we're afraid. And so we hide ourselves, first from ourselves, and then we hide from each other. And when we do finally venture out, we dress ourselves up, not with fig leaves, but with the armor of respectability, success, and mastery. Mastery that we don't even believe in. And so we vacillate between feelings of envy and find pleasure when others experience misfortune. But I say, enough of Schadenfreude. It's time to be open and vulnerable. Share your struggles and choose to live in God's word of Freudenfreude. Yes, those Germans, they have another word for finding pleasure in another person's good fortune, even if it doesn't directly involve you. But of course, in God's world, it always does. We are one family. This world is built in a way that success and good fortune creates more. Today, I invite you to see the inherent goodness that God has created. Don't just look to Jesus. Come out of hiding yourself and look at yourself. Look at your neighbor. Have faith that you are good, very good. Amen.